going to be talking about Alzheimer's disease and some of the symptoms that result from the brain damage that occurs and how we can respond. We as loved ones, as friends, and as those that work with them, how can we best respond to these challenging symptoms that we see in a person with Alzheimer's disease? So of course the brain is really the control center for our entire bodies. So when we're talking about a disease that's damaging the brain, like Alzheimer's, we need to know that eventually it will affect the entire body, the entire person. I always say that if Alzheimer's was just a disease that made us forget things, it was just a memory problem, it wouldn't be nearly as hard to deal with as it is. Don't you agree? Because we can use tools and little ways to help us remember, and that would be easier. But again, and we're going to get into some specifics, but the fact that it does affect the entire body makes it extremely difficult, of course, for the person with the disease, but also those around them. Eventually, Alzheimer's disease, of course, affects communication, behavior, judgment, reasoning, inhibitions, and ultimately things like how the brain is interpreting what the eyes are seeing. I mean, it's amazing. It truly is amazing. So I just wanted to start for a minute showing you a couple of really powerful pictures. And the first one is a healthy brain that's been autopsied and it's been sliced in half. We're actually looking down on a brain. And this is the way we want our brains to look as we age. It's nice and full. And now we're going to flip to the next one, and I want you to look at the difference in the brain of someone who had advanced Alzheimer's disease. Isn't that remarkable? So if you get nothing else today, I hope that you can kind of freeze frame this picture in your mind, because we know, and as we're talking about the symptoms here in a minute, I totally understand the great amount of patience that it takes to answer the same questions, 30 times in 10 minutes, to do everything that you need to do, and the great patience that it takes. But if you can remember, and I'm going to explain in a minute what's going on a little bit in the brain, but again, it's brain damage. They're losing brain cells. And so they are trying to function the very best they can with a lot fewer brain cells than you and I have. So we need to show them a lot of grace, a lot of patience, and that's why it's important that if you are a caregiver, that you get some time away as well, because this is extremely overwhelming to deal with. And I just think it's such a powerful, powerful picture. And so ultimately the brain is shrinking as the cells die. The brain is shrinking, and so in the end it weighs considerably less than our brains do, because it doesn't have the mass that we do. It doesn't have the brain cells. So what exactly is going on? What's causing Alzheimer's disease? Well, darn it, we don't really know exactly what's causing it yet. The good news is they are researching it like crazy, because they understand that, well, the number one risk factor, gosh darn it, is age. Haven't figured out a way to get around that one yet, have we? But because the baby boomers, and I'm on the very tail end of that, but the huge number of baby boomers are now entering this age of risk, which is typically we see the symptoms after age 65. And so they recognize that Medicaid and Medicare are really not going to be able to handle that kind of a number of people with Alzheimer's disease. It's a very expensive disease to care for. So the good news in that is that they are truly researching this like crazy, and that's a good thing. But again, we don't know exactly what's causing it, but we do know some things that we need to be looking for. When a brain is autopsied, they're going to be looking for two telltale markers. One is amyloid plaque, an abnormal buildup of a plaque between the brain cells, which ultimately results in those cells dying off. And also some abnormal protein on the outside of the brain, which is called tau tangles, and those as well result in those cells dying. And then there's a third issue going on, and that is that a neurotransmitter, a chemical in our brains that we need for the messages to go from one cell to another within the brain and then out to our bodies, that chemical is not being produced at the level that it needs to be. So that's another issue that's going on in the brain. There is no single test today to determine if somebody has Alzheimer's disease. That's one of the things they're working on, perhaps a blood test or something like that down the road. But right now, there really isn't any one single test. The only way to be 100% accurate is with an autopsy, but we can get really close. If somebody were to go to a diagnostic center, like we have one here in Muskegon at Hackley Hospital, the Neuroscience Center, and also Mercy Hospital has one as well, Mercy Geriatric Care Centers, they do an assessment as well. And because they don't have a single test, what they're going to do is a series of tests. They'll do a scan of the brain, MRI scan, they'll do a lot of blood work, they'll do a complete medical exam, they'll have you talk to a psychologist and a social worker, and they'll talk to the family as well as the individual that's sick. And what they're really going to do is put all the information together and rule out any other possible causes. Again, by doing that, they can be pretty darn close, 90–95% accurate. Family doctors, you can go to a family doctor, and some are real good at running through some of these tests as well and diagnosing some. Maybe not so good, but you just need to feel comfortable with the diagnosis. But we do encourage people to get as early a diagnosis as possible, because first of all, if you're going to use a medication, they think it will be more effective if you can get it going sooner. Also, it helps you in planning and things like that. So that's a good thing.